He thought he was about to share a peaceful cup of tea with the woman he planned to marry. Instead, one quiet warning from the least important person in the mansion would become the dividing line between life and death. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe dignity and courage can come from the most unexpected people, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, back to Simone Brooks. The crystal chandelier scattered warm golden light across the polished marble floor of the Kang estate, reflecting against walls lined with priceless paintings collected from decades of quiet power. Every chair in the private dining salon had been placed with mathematical precision. Every silver spoon gleamed. Every bodyguard stood perfectly still, hands folded in front of tailored black suits, eyes scanning every movement except the one that truly mattered. Simone Brooks lowered her gaze as she stepped inside, carrying an antique porcelain tea service balanced carefully on a polished silver tray. The young black maid had worked at the estate for only 3 weeks, long enough to memorize every hallway, long enough to understand one unspoken rule. Invisible people survived. She moved silently across the Persian carpet, careful not to interrupt the conversation between Adrian Kang and his fiancée, Vanessa Whitmore. Adrian Kang sat at the head of the table with the effortless authority of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to command a room. His charcoal suit fit him like armor. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable, while his dark eyes missed nothing around him. Those who worked inside the mansion often whispered that Mr. Kang could sense betrayal before anyone spoke a single word. Vanessa laughed softly across from him, elegant in an ivory dress that shimmered beneath the chandelier. She reached across the table, touching Adrian's hand with practiced affection. "I found this tea during my trip to Kyoto," she said warmly. "I wanted tonight to be special." Simone carefully placed the teapot beside Adrian's cup. The fragrant steam rose gently into the air. Then she froze, almost imperceptible beneath. The delicate scent of jasmine floated another smell. Bitter almonds. Faint, almost impossible to notice. Her heartbeat stumbled. The memory struck without warning. She was 12 years old again, standing beside her foster father inside a tiny laboratory where he inspected chemical contamination for a pharmaceutical company. "Never trust perfume," he had once whispered while placing tiny glass bottles beneath her nose. "Some poisons hide behind beautiful scents. Your eyes can lie. Your nose rarely does." Back inside the mansion, Simone's fingers tightened around the silver tray until her knuckles turned white. No, it couldn't be. She leaned closer under the excuse of adjusting the teacup. There it was again, the same bitter trace. Her breathing became shallow. If she stayed silent, Mr. Kang would drink. If she spoke, she would almost certainly lose her job. Or worse. Across the room, Victor Hale, Adrian's chief of security, watched every movement with the cold attention of a hunting wolf. One wrong gesture would bring half a dozen armed guards rushing toward her. Simone felt sweat forming beneath her uniform despite the cool air flowing through the room. Her mind screamed at her to leave. Walk away. Pretend she had noticed nothing. Invisible people survived. But good people couldn't watch another human being die. Adrian lifted the porcelain cup with steady fingers. The tea shimmered beneath the warm light. One more second. His hand rose toward his lips. Simone's heart pounded so violently she could barely hear herself think. Before fear could silence her, she took one desperate step forward. "Sir." Her trembling voice sliced through the perfect silence of the room. Every eye turned toward her. Adrian paused without drinking. Simone swallowed hard, her entire future hanging on the next 4 words. "Your tea is poison." The porcelain cup stopped less than an inch from Adrian Kang's lips. No one breathed. Then, almost instantly, 6 pistols were drawn and pointed directly at the young black maid. 6 pistols locked onto Simone Brooks before the echo of her warning had even faded from the marble walls. No one moved. No one breathed. The silver tray slipped from Simone's trembling hands and struck the polished floor with a sharp metallic crash that shattered the silence. Porcelain cups exploded into white fragments across the marble, hot tea spreading like a dark stain beneath the chandelier's golden light. Victor Hale stepped forward first. His pistol remained perfectly steady, aimed directly between Simone's eyes. "On your knees." The command carried no anger, only certainty. Simone slowly raised her shaking hands. Her pulse hammered so violently she could hear nothing else. Across the dining table, Vanessa Whitmore stared at her in stunned disbelief before outrage quickly replaced surprise. "What did you just say?" she demanded, rising from her chair. "Do you have any idea who you're accusing?" Simone swallowed hard. Her voice barely escaped. I'm not accusing anyone, ma'am." "Then explain yourself." "The tea." Her eyes drifted toward Adrian's untouched porcelain cup. "It isn't safe." Vanessa let out a short, humorless laugh. "This is ridiculous." She turned toward Adrian with wounded disbelief. "My fiancé. I brought that tea back from Japan myself." Her voice softened instantly. "I wanted tonight to be special." The contrast was almost theatrical. Elegant. Heartbroken. Completely believable. Several staff members standing near the doorway exchanged uncertain glances. To them, Simone was simply the newest maid. A quiet young black woman who spent her days polishing silver and changing fresh flowers. Why would anyone believe her over the future Mrs. Kang? Victor reached Simone first. He seized her wrist with enough force to make her wince before twisting both hands behind her back. "If this is some kind of stunt," he said coldly, "it will be your last." Pain shot through her shoulders. Still, she never looked away from Adrian's untouched cup. Adrian Kang remained seated. He had not lowered the porcelain cup, nor had he taken another sip. His expression revealed nothing. His calm unsettled everyone far more than anger ever could. His dark eyes settled quietly on Simone. "Look at me." She hesitated. 3 weeks inside the Kang estate had taught her never to meet his eyes. Invisible people. Survived. Yet this time she slowly lifted her gaze. Fear met composure. Desperation met silence. "What exactly made you believe my tea is poisoned?" His voice was almost conversational. That frightened her more than shouting would have. She hesitated. How could she explain something based only on a scent? No laboratory. No evidence. Only memory. "I smelled bitter almonds." The room became strangely quiet. One of the older servants frowned in confusion. Vanessa folded her arms. "Bitter almonds?" She laughed again. "That's your proof." Simone nodded weakly. "My foster father taught chemical safety for years." Victor interrupted immediately. "Sir, she's lying." Another guard added. "No poison can be identified by smell alone." Murmurs spread through the room. "She's trying to get attention. Maybe someone paid her. Perhaps she's working for another family." Each whispered accusation landed heavier than the one before. Simone felt every pair of eyes judging her. Not one person stepped forward. Not one person believed her. Except, Adrian still hadn't touched the cup. His fingers rested lightly around the delicate porcelain. He wasn't convinced. But neither had he dismissed her. Vanessa noticed his hesitation. Her smile disappeared. "You don't actually believe this, do you?" Adrian answered without looking at her. "I believe in verifying unusual claims. It insults me that you'd even consider." She stopped speaking as Adrian calmly placed the untouched teacup back onto its saucer. The tiny sound of porcelain against porcelain echoed through the silent dining room. "So," Vanessa said quietly, "what now?" No one answered. Victor tightened his grip on Simone. "Sir, permission to remove her." Simone closed her eyes. She had expected this. Losing her job had been the best possible outcome. She had prepared herself for something much worse. Then Adrian spoke. One calm sentence. "Not yet." The entire room froze. His gaze never left Simone. "If you are wrong," he said quietly, "you've just accused my future wife and disrupted my home." A long pause followed. "But if you are right." He let the unfinished sentence hang in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. Simone's breathing became uneven. She knew words would never be enough. No one here trusted her. No one ever would. Slowly, despite Victor's grip, she fixed her eyes on the untouched cup. Then, with a resolve that surprised even herself, she whispered the only thing left that could prove she truly believed every word she had spoken. "Then let me drink it first." The room seemed to stop breathing after Simone's quiet words. "Then let me drink it first." For a heartbeat, no one understood what she meant. Victor Hale's grip tightened around her wrists. "What did you say?" Simone slowly lifted her chin, her dark eyes never leaving the untouched porcelain cup resting before Adrian Kang. "If I'm wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling but unmistakably clear, "then I'll prove it with my own life." The sentence settled over the dining room like falling snow. Several servants stared at her in disbelief. Vanessa's expression shifted from outrage to disbelief. "You've lost your mind." Simone barely heard her. Her heartbeat drowned out every sound inside the mansion. She wasn't brave. She wasn't fearless. She was terrified. Every instinct begged her to stay quiet, apologize, and disappear before these powerful people decided she had become a problem too dangerous to keep alive. But another thought refused to leave her. If Mr. Kang drinks that tea, he dies. Nothing else mattered. Before Victor could react, Simone twisted sharply, slipping one hand free from his grip just enough to lunge toward the dining table. Gasps echoed across the room. The nearest bodyguards reached for her. Too late. Her trembling fingers wrapped around the delicate porcelain cup. Steam still curled gently into the air. For the first time since entering the mansion, Adrian Kang's composure cracked almost imperceptibly. "Stop." His voice was low, controlled, absolute. But Simone had already begun lifting the cup. If she drank it, either she would expose herself as a liar, or prove that every warning had been true. She closed her eyes. The warm porcelain touched her lips. Then another hand surrounded hers. Large, steady, unexpectedly gentle. The cup stopped before a single drop. Reached her mouth. Simone slowly opened her eyes. Adrian stood directly in front of her. He had crossed the distance without anyone noticing. His fingers remained wrapped firmly around the cup, while his dark eyes searched her face with an intensity that made the entire world disappear. She expected anger. She expected disgust. Instead, she found questions. "You were actually willing to die?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Simone struggled to answer. "I couldn't watch someone else die." Silence. A dangerous silence. Adrian continued studying her face. There was no panic hidden behind her eyes. No calculation. No satisfaction. Only fear. And something even rarer. Conviction. Victor finally stepped beside them. "Sir, let me remove her immediately." Adrian didn't move. Vanessa folded her arms tightly across her chest. "This has gone far enough, Adrian." She walked toward him, her heels clicking softly across the marble floor. "This girl is manipulating you." She glanced coldly at Simone. "She's creating drama because she wants attention." Simone lowered her eyes. "No, ma'am." "Oh." Vanessa's smile carried no warmth. "Then explain why a maid who has worked here less than a month suddenly decides she knows more than everyone else." "I don't." "Then why interrupt dinner?" "Because." Simone swallowed. "Because poison doesn't care about social status." The sentence escaped before she realized she had spoken it aloud. Another silence followed. Several servants stared at her. Even Victor seemed momentarily caught off guard. No one had ever dared answer Vanessa Whitmore that way. Not with disrespect, but with simple honesty. Vanessa's face hardened. "You insolent, enough." Adrian's calm interruption cut through the room more effectively than shouting ever could. He carefully removed the teacup from Simone's trembling hands and placed it back onto the silver tray. His movements remained slow, deliberate, measured. He looked toward Victor. "Seal the dining room." Victor blinked. "Sir." "No one leaves." The room instantly shifted. Bodyguards moved toward every entrance. Heavy doors closed with quiet precision. Locks clicked. The atmosphere changed from elegant dinner to controlled crime scene. Vanessa's confidence wavered for the first time. "You cannot seriously be investigating tea." Adrian finally turned toward her. "I investigate anything that gives me reason to." His eyes drifted back toward the untouched porcelain cup, then toward Simone. She stood perfectly still, her breathing uneven, tears threatening to spill but refusing to fall. He had spent most of his adult life studying liars. Rival bosses, politicians, informants, professional actors. People lied with their mouths, their hands, their breathing, their pupils, their silence. Yet the frightened young maid standing before him displayed none of the familiar signs. Either she was the greatest actress he had ever encountered, or she truly believed that cup contained death. Adrian looked toward Victor one final time. "Call Dr. Hahn." Victor frowned. "Our physician?" "No." Adrian's voice grew even quieter. "The forensic toxicologist." Every face in the room turned pale, because everyone present understood exactly what that order meant. The tea would not be tasted. It would be tested. The waiting was worse than the accusation. No one spoke after Adrian Kang ordered the tea to be tested. The grand dining room remained sealed, its heavy oak doors guarded from both sides. Crystal chandeliers still bathed the room in warm light, but the warmth had vanished. Every servant stood frozen where they had been ordered to remain. Every bodyguard watched everyone else. Suspicion had become another guest at the table. Simone Brooks sat alone in a straight-back chair near the fireplace. No one offered her water. No one asked if she was all right. Victor Hale had ordered 2 guards to stand beside her, not because she had attacked anyone, but because they still weren't certain whether she was a witness or the architect of the entire evening. She folded her trembling hands together in her lap. Invisible people survived. Tonight, she had made herself impossible to ignore. Across the room, Vanessa Whitmore paced slowly beside the windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. Every few minutes, she glanced toward Simone with the same mixture of anger and disbelief. "I still can't believe we're doing this," she finally said. Her voice echoed through the silent room. One frightened maid makes a ridiculous accusation, and suddenly everyone acts as though I'm on trial. No one answered. Adrian remained seated at the head of the table, his elbows resting lightly against the polished wood. He wasn't watching Vanessa. He was watching Simone. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. She hadn't tried to explain herself again. She simply waited. That unsettled him more than panic ever could. People who lied usually talked too much. People who feared punishment often searched desperately for sympathy. Simone didn't either. She simply sat in silence, as though she had already accepted whatever judgment awaited her. Nearly 40 minutes later, footsteps echoed beyond the locked doors. Victor opened them immediately. An elderly man carrying a silver equipment case entered the dining room. Dr. Daniel Hahn, the most respected forensic toxicologist Adrian had ever trusted. Without greeting anyone, Dr. Hahn placed the case upon the dining table and carefully removed several sealed instruments. Glass vials, disposable pipettes, chemical strips, portable testing equipment. His movements were slow, methodical, precise. The room watched in complete silence as he transferred a single drop of tea into a transparent vial. Another chemical followed. The clear liquid remained motionless. Then, it changed. Barely. A pale amber cloud drifted through the solution. Dr. Hahn frowned. No one dared interrupt him. He repeated the procedure. Again, then a third time. The amber color deepened. His expression grew noticeably more serious. Victor took one step forward. Dr. Hahn didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for another reagent from his case. Minutes passed. The only sounds came from glass touching metal and quiet breathing inside the room. Finally, he slowly removed his glasses. "I need laboratory confirmation." Vanessa released a sharp breath of relief. "There." She folded her arms triumphantly. "I told everyone." But Dr. Hahn calmly raised one finger. "I didn't say the tea is safe." The room froze again. "I said I require laboratory confirmation because the preliminary reaction is unusual." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Unusual how?" Dr. Hahn looked directly at him. "There appears to be a compound present that should not exist in ordinary tea." Every servant exchanged nervous glances. Victor's jaw tightened. Vanessa's confidence faltered. "What does that mean?" Adrian asked. "It means," Dr. Hahn replied carefully, "either someone contaminated this tea." He paused. "Or someone possesses access to a toxin sophisticated enough to avoid immediate detection." Silence swallowed the room. No one looked at Vanessa anymore. Everyone looked at the untouched porcelain cup. Adrian slowly rose from his chair. His expression remained calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that usually appeared moments before an empire shifted. He walked past the dining table and stopped in front of Simone. She immediately stood, lowering her eyes. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble, sir." Her voice was barely audible. "I only wanted, you smelled bitter almonds." "Yes. You've encountered that scent before." She hesitated. For the first time that night, emotion surfaced across her face. Not fear. Memory. "When I was growing up," she said quietly, "my foster father worked as a chemical safety inspector." The room remained silent. He wasn't wealthy. A faint smile appeared despite herself. "Our house was tiny. Sometimes he brought home harmless training samples after work." She could almost see the old wooden kitchen again. The cracked windows. The worn workbench. The man who had raised her after she lost everything. "He used to blindfold me." Several people looked confused. Simone continued softly. He believed people depended too much on their eyes. So he trained my sense of smell. Different solvents, cleaning agents, industrial chemicals. She looked toward the untouched cup, and once, her smile disappeared. He spent an entire afternoon teaching me never to forget the scent of bitter almonds. Adrian listened without interrupting. Why? Because he said one mistake could cost someone their life. A long silence settled between them. Then Adrian asked the question no one else had considered. If your foster father taught you all that? His voice became almost thoughtful. Why are you working here as a maid instead of inside a laboratory? Simone lowered her eyes once more. The answer came so quietly that everyone had to lean forward to hear it. Because after he died, I had no one left to finish the life he started. After that answer, no one looked at Simone Brooks the same way. Not because she had become important, but because she had become impossible to understand. The mansion had seen maids who stole jewelry, drivers who accepted bribes, security guards who secretly worked for rival families. Everyone had a price. Everyone had a hidden motive. Yet the young black maid standing quietly beneath the chandelier seemed to have none. Adrian Kang watched her for several long seconds before turning toward Victor Hale. Escort Miss Whitmore to the East Wing. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. You're isolating me? I'm protecting everyone until the laboratory finishes its work. You still don't trust me. I don't trust uncertainty. His answer carried neither accusation nor comfort, only cold logic. Vanessa searched his face, hoping to find hesitation. She found none. Without another word, she turned sharply and disappeared through the guarded doorway, followed by 2 security officers. The room felt noticeably emptier after she left. Adrian buttoned his jacket. Victor. Yes, sir. I want everything. Victor frowned. Everything. Employment history. Financial records. Phone activity. Family. Friends. He paused briefly and began with Simone Brooks. The word surprised nearly everyone present, including Simone herself. She lowered her eyes. She understood exactly what that meant. Powerful men never trusted miracles. They investigated them. Less than an hour later, inside the estate's private security office, dozens of monitors illuminated the dark room with pale blue light. Victor sat before a long table covered with files and digital reports as investigators worked in complete silence. One screen displayed surveillance footage from the mansion. Another showed employment records. Another traced financial transactions. Every detail of Simone's life was being pulled apart. One investigator finally looked up. Sir. Victor turned. She's unusual. Explain. No criminal record. No debts. No overseas transfers. No suspicious contacts. He clicked through another report. No gambling. No expensive purchases. No unexplained income. Victor folded his arms. Keep digging. Another investigator opened a different file. We contacted her previous employers. And they all said the same thing. Victor looked over. Quiet. Always early. Worked overtime. Never complained. The investigator hesitated. One restaurant owner actually cried during the interview. Victor raised an eyebrow. Cried. He said Simone worked double shifts for almost 2 years. Why? To pay for chemotherapy. Victor looked confused. Whose? The investigator swallowed. Her younger foster brother. Silence settled across the room. Another file appeared. He passed away 18 months ago. Victor slowly leaned back in his chair. Any inheritance? None. Insurance? No. Family? No surviving parents. No siblings. No property. Nothing. The word echoed quietly through the room. Nothing. She had nothing. At nearly the same moment, Adrian stood alone inside his office overlooking the dark gardens. Rain had begun falling softly against the enormous glass windows. The untouched teacup rested on his desk inside a sealed evidence container. He couldn't stop looking at it. One cup, one warning, one stranger. His thoughts returned to Simone's face when she volunteered to drink first. Fear had been there. Real fear. But something stronger had stood beside it. Responsibility. He had spent years building an empire where loyalty could be purchased. Respect could be negotiated. Fear could be manufactured. Yet the maid who had tried to save him had asked for nothing. Not money. Not recognition. Not protection. Only that he didn't drink. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. Victor entered carrying a thin black folder. You asked for everything. Adrian accepted it. The folder contained barely a dozen pages. far thinner than expected. He opened the first page. Employment records, cleaning services, restaurant kitchens, hotel housekeeping, night shifts, temporary agencies. He continued reading. Volunteer work at a neighborhood shelter. Blood donations every year. A recommendation letter describing her as the first to arrive and the last to leave. Nothing extraordinary. Everything extraordinary. Near the end of the file, a faded photograph slipped onto the desk. It showed a teenage Simone standing beside an older man wearing a worn laboratory coat. Both smiled at the camera. The building behind them looked modest, almost forgotten. On the back of the photograph, written in faded blue ink, were only 8 words. The world needs people who choose courage over comfort. Adrian read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Something inside him shifted ever so slightly. Not trust. Not yet. But curiosity. Deep, persistent curiosity. At that exact moment, Victor's secure phone vibrated sharply. He answered immediately. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the color slowly drained from his face. He lowered the phone and looked directly at Adrian. The laboratory has finished. A long silence followed. Victor's next sentence barely rose above a whisper. Sir, the tea tested positive. The words hit the room with more force than a gunshot. The tea tested positive. Victor Hale rarely showed emotion. Tonight, even he couldn't hide it. He stood motionless beside Adrian Kang's desk, the laboratory report still glowing on the secure tablet in his hands. Outside, rain streaked across the towering glass windows, blurring the lights of the estate into pale rivers of gold. Inside, the silence became unbearable. Adrian didn't reach for the report. He simply looked at Victor. What exactly did they find? Victor glanced back at the screen. An engineered neurotoxin. He swallowed. The concentration was small enough to delay symptoms for several hours. So the victim wouldn't collapse immediately. They would leave the estate believing they were perfectly healthy. Victor's voice grew quieter. By the time the toxin attacked the nervous system, it would be almost impossible to trace where it entered the body. The office fell silent again. It wasn't an impulsive murder. It was designed. Patiently. Professionally. Someone hadn't wanted Adrian Kang to die at dinner. Someone wanted him to die somewhere else. Several minutes later, the entire Security Council assembled inside the underground conference room. Massive digital screens illuminated maps of the estate. Every employee's photograph appeared one after another. Chefs, drivers, gardeners, security officers, housekeepers. No one was exempt anymore. Adrian stood at the head of the table. The poison is confirmed. Nobody spoke. He looked around the room. Which means one thing. His calm voice echoed across polished concrete walls. Someone inside this estate attempted to assassinate me. Victor activated another display. A timeline appeared. The tea leaves entered the mansion yesterday afternoon. Stored in the private kitchen. Accessed by 7 people. One face after another appeared beside timestamps. Kitchen staff. Inventory manager. Tea sommelier. 2 assistants. A security supervisor. Finally, Vanessa Whitmore. The room became noticeably quieter. Victor looked toward Adrian. She personally requested that particular tea be prepared for tonight. No one dared comment. Not because they believed Vanessa was guilty. Because saying her name aloud had suddenly become dangerous. Adrian studied the timeline without changing expression. What about Simone? Victor switched screens. None. No kitchen access. No contact with the tea. No interaction with the evidence before serving. Another investigator added quietly. According to surveillance footage, Miss Brooks touched the tray for the first time less than 40 seconds before entering the dining room. Adrian nodded once. Continue. While the investigation intensified underground, Simone sat alone inside a small guest room guarded from the outside. It wasn't exactly a prison, but neither was it freedom. She stared through the rain-covered window, replaying every moment from dinner. The bitter almond scent. The trembling cup. Mr. Kang's eyes. She had saved his life. At least, she hoped she had. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened. An older housekeeper entered carrying a tray of hot soup. Mrs. Eleanor Graves had worked for the Kang family longer than anyone else still living. She quietly placed the tray on the table. You should eat. Simone offered a weak smile. I'm not very hungry. Mrs. Graves remained standing. For several moments, she simply watched the young woman. Finally, she spoke. I've been here 26 years. Simone looked up. I've seen ambitious people, greedy people, liars, traitors. She paused. I've never seen someone volunteer to drink poison. Simone lowered her eyes. I didn't know what else to do. Mrs. Graves studied her carefully. Most people protect themselves first. I wasn't thinking about myself. I know. The older woman smiled sadly. And that's exactly why I'm worried. Before Simone could ask what she meant, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. The door burst open. Victor entered. His usually composed face carried an urgency no one inside the mansion had ever witnessed. Miss Brooks. She immediately stood. Yes. I need you to come with me. What happened? Victor hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The laboratory discovered something else. He looked directly into her eyes. The poison wasn't mixed into the tea leaves. Simone frowned. Then, it was added after the tea had already been brewed. Her heartbeat quickened. That means, Victor finished the sentence. It means the killer was inside the dining room. The realization struck them both at exactly the same moment. Only 5 people had been close enough to the teapot after it was poured. Adrian Kang, Vanessa Whitmore, Victor Hale, one senior servant, and Simone Brooks. For the first time since the investigation began, the list of suspects had become terrifyingly short. Sometimes the most dangerous trap is the one you willingly walk into. The words echoed inside Simone Brooks's mind as Victor Hale escorted her through the silent corridors of the Kang estate. Every servant they passed lowered their eyes. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with suspicion. After all, the list of possible suspects now contained only 5 names, and hers was one of them. The mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a chessboard. Every smile, every glance, every footstep, a calculated move. Victor stopped outside Adrian Kang's private study. He opened the heavy walnut door. Mr. Kang is waiting. Simone stepped inside. The room was dim except for the fire burning quietly beneath a carved stone mantel. Rain still tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark forest beyond the estate. Adrian stood with his back to the room. His hands rested behind him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, he turned. His expression remained calm, but his eyes carried something new. Not suspicion, not gratitude. Responsibility. I owe you an apology. Simone blinked. You do? I investigated you before I believed you. She lowered her gaze. I understand. No. His voice was firm. You shouldn't have to. Silence settled between them. Adrian walked toward the evidence table where the sealed teapot rested beneath bright forensic lights. The laboratory confirmed another detail. Simone looked up. The poison wasn't intended to kill immediately. I know. You know? She nodded slowly. My foster father used to say. Her voice softened. Professional killers don't always want people to die where they're poisoned. Adrian studied her carefully. Why? Because chaos hides truth. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked another question. If you were trying to kill me. Simone looked startled. Where would you choose? She hesitated, then walked toward the estate map spread across the conference table. Her finger stopped above a location nearly 20 miles away. The charity gala tomorrow night. Victor frowned. Why there? Because hundreds of people will be there. She looked at Adrian. If you collapsed during a public speech, everyone would assume stress, or exhaustion, or a heart attack. No one would think about tea served the night before. The room fell silent. Victor slowly looked toward Adrian. The same conclusion had never crossed the investigation team's mind. Adrian folded his arms. Continue. Simone took a slow breath. If the killer planned this carefully, then tomorrow isn't over. He already has a second plan. Victor immediately shook his head. There's no evidence of another attack. No. Simone agreed quietly. There wouldn't be. If I were him, I'd expect the first poison to succeed. But now it hasn't. She looked directly at Adrian. So he'll adapt. The fire cracked softly inside the fireplace. Nobody spoke, because everyone knew she was right. Less than 30 minutes later, Adrian summoned his entire security command. The charity gala proceeds as scheduled. Several officers exchanged shocked looks. Victor spoke first. Sir, with respect, we should cancel. Adrian looked at him. If we disappear, the assassin disappears. A long pause followed. We attend, but we change the rules. Dozens of new security measures appeared on the digital screens. Food testing, weapon scanners, medical teams, rooftop snipers, emergency extraction routes. Everything. Then Adrian looked toward Simone. I have one more assignment. She straightened instinctively. You've noticed things my security team overlooked. Victor looked confused. Sir, I want Miss Brooks beside me tomorrow. The room erupted with objections. Impossible. She's still a suspect. She's untrained. It's too dangerous. Adrian raised one hand. Instant silence. Exactly. Everyone stared at him. If the killer believes Simone remains under suspicion, he won't expect her to be watching. Victor slowly understood. You want to use her as bait. The sentence hung heavily in the room. Every eye turned toward Simone. No one asked whether she agreed. No one expected her to. Adrian did. He walked toward her until only a few feet separated them. You can refuse. His voice remained gentle. I'll arrange protection. You've already risked enough. Simone looked down at her hands. They were still trembling slightly. Not from fear. From memory. She remembered the faded photograph of her foster father. The words he had written years before. The world needs people who choose courage over comfort. She slowly lifted her eyes. If I refuse, someone else could die. Adrian didn't answer. She gave him a small, almost invisible smile. Then I'll go. Victor closed his eyes briefly. He had spent 20 years protecting powerful men. Yet the bravest person in the room wasn't carrying a gun. She was wearing a simple black maid's uniform. Late that night, hidden behind the estate's surveillance cameras, another pair of eyes watched the meeting from an encrypted remote feed. A gloved hand quietly closed a laptop. The unseen figure smiled beneath the darkness. So, a calm voice whispered, the maid survived. A small glass vial filled with clear liquid was placed onto a wooden table. Next to it rested an invitation embossed with gold lettering. The Kang Foundation Annual Charity Gala. The voice spoke once more. Then tomorrow, we'll poison something she can't smell. The assassin had prepared for Adrian Kang. He had not prepared for Simone Brooks. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel glittered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, every polished surface reflecting wealth, influence, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Politicians exchanged handshakes with business leaders. Diplomats posed for photographs. Classical music floated gently through the air, while servers moved gracefully between tables carrying silver trays filled with champagne. To everyone else, it was another prestigious charity gala. To Adrian's security team, it was a battlefield. Victor Hale stood near the entrance, quietly speaking into his earpiece. Perimeter clear. Rooftops secured. No visual threats. Across the room, Simone walked several steps behind Adrian, still wearing a simple black uniform, while every other woman around her wore designer gowns worth more than she earned in several years. Some guests noticed. Most ignored her. Exactly as expected. Invisible people survived. Tonight, however, being invisible might save everyone. Adrian greeted donors with his usual composed confidence, but his attention never completely left Simone. Several times he caught her studying the room instead of the guests. She wasn't looking at faces. She was watching hands, movements, patterns. People rarely noticed what servants noticed. Who touched a glass? Who entered through staff doors? Who smiled without using their eyes? Nearly 40 minutes passed without incident. Victor finally allowed himself to breathe a little easier. Maybe the killer had abandoned the plan. Then Simone stopped walking. Her eyes fixed on a young waiter crossing the ballroom. Nothing about him seemed unusual. Perfect uniform. Professional posture. Steady hands. Almost too steady. She frowned. Something wasn't right. Not his face. His rhythm. Every server occasionally looked toward guests before offering a drink. This man never did. He wasn't searching for customers. He was searching for Adrian. Simone slowly changed direction. The waiter noticed. Only for half a second. But in that brief moment, he adjusted course. Toward Adrian. Her heartbeat exploded. The silver tray he carried held crystal champagne flutes. One glass sat slightly apart from the others. Its stem bore an almost invisible black marking. Not decoration. Identification. Simone remembered another lesson from her foster father. Poison doesn't always hide inside the bottle. Sometimes, it waits inside a single glass. She didn't think. She ran. Mr. Kang. The music drowned her voice. Adrian turned only slightly. The waiter closed the final few steps with calm precision. His smile never changed. "Congratulations, Mr. Kang." He extended the marked glass. Everything happened at once. Simone threw herself between them. Her shoulders slammed into the silver tray. Crystal exploded across the marble floor. Champagne sprayed through the air like rain. The marked glass shattered only inches from Adrian's shoes. The waiter reacted instantly. Not like a waiter, like a trained operative. Instead of showing surprise, he reached inside his jacket. Victor shouted, "Weapon!" Security agents surged forward. The man abandoned the hidden object and sprinted toward the emergency exit. Guests screamed. Tables overturned. The orchestra stopped playing. Panic swept across the ballroom. Victor and 3 agents chased the fleeing assassin through the service corridor. Adrian instinctively reached for Simone. She had fallen hard against the marble after colliding with the tray. "Simone." She tried to answer. No words came. Her breathing had become strangely shallow. Adrian immediately saw it. A thin line of blood ran across her left palm. Not from broken glass. From a tiny puncture. Almost invisible. His eyes widened. The shattered champagne glass hadn't been the only weapon. Hidden among the broken crystal lay an elegant silver cocktail pick. Its sharpened tip glistened with clear liquid. Simone had grabbed the tray with her bare hand. The needle had pierced her skin. Victor's voice echoed through the radio. The suspect escaped. Nobody answered him, because Adrian had already dropped to his knees beside Simone. Her breathing grew weaker. Her eyelids fluttered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I couldn't save." "Don't." Adrian's voice cracked for the first time in years. "You already did." He removed his jacket and pressed it firmly against her injured hand, though he knew the poison had almost certainly entered her bloodstream. Medical staff rushed toward them. Someone called for an ambulance. Someone else shouted for an antidote. But Dr. Han, who had accompanied the security team, froze the instant he saw the wound. His face turned pale. "I know this toxin." Adrian looked up. "Can you save her?" Dr. Han hesitated, just long enough for hope to begin disappearing. "It isn't impossible." His voice grew quiet. "But we have less than 15 minutes. The magnificent ballroom that moments earlier had celebrated generosity now stood frozen in absolute silence. Hundreds of guests watched as the most powerful man in the room held the trembling hand of the black Maid who had saved his life. For the second time, the longest 15 minutes of Adrian Kang's life were measured not by a clock, but by Simone Brooks's heartbeat. The ambulance raced through the rain-soaked streets, its siren tearing through the night, while emergency lights painted the city in flashes of blue and red. Inside, paramedics worked with disciplined urgency. Dr. Daniel Han knelt beside Simone, his gloved hands moving quickly across a portable medical kit. Blood pressure dropping, pulse irregular. He looked toward the paramedic. The antidote. A syringe was placed into his hand. Dr. Han hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "This formulation is experimental." Adrian looked directly at him. "Will it save her?" "It gives her a chance." "Then give it." Without another word, Dr. Han injected the antidote into the vein of Simone's trembling arm. The seconds that followed felt endless. Nothing happened. Then, her breathing became steadier. The violent trembling in her fingers slowly eased. Color began returning to her face. Dr. Han released the breath he had been holding. "I think." He checked her pulse once more. "She's going to survive." For the first time in many years, Adrian quietly closed his eyes. Not from exhaustion, from gratitude. 3 days later, morning sunlight spilled through the windows of a private hospital suite overlooking the river. Simone slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was a vase filled with fresh white lilies. The second was Adrian Kang sitting silently beside the window. His suit jacket rested over the back of the chair. Dark circles beneath his eyes revealed that sleep had become a luxury. When he noticed her moving, he stood immediately. "You frightened everyone." Simone managed a weak smile. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "No." His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "You have nothing to apologize for." Silence settled gently between them. It no longer felt uncomfortable, only honest. A quiet knock interrupted the moment. Victor entered carrying a sealed investigation file. "We found him." Adrian turned. "The waiter?" Victor nodded. "He never worked for the hotel. He entered using forged credentials." And Victor placed another photograph on the bedside table. It showed a familiar face. The senior inventory manager from the Kang estate. The man responsible for receiving supplies. The waiter confessed before he died. Simone looked up in surprise. He died. He carried a cyanide capsule. Victor's expression remained cold. He took it before interrogation. Another silence. The inventory manager admitted he accepted money to provide access to the estate. But he never knew the assassin's identity. So Vanessa? Simone asked quietly. Victor shook his head. She was completely innocent. Adrian looked toward the window. The engagement ended this morning. Not because she was guilty. Because trust, once broken by suspicion, rarely returns unchanged. 1 month later, every employee of the Kang estate gathered inside the grand entrance hall. The same marble floor. The same crystal chandelier. The same room where Simone had once stood surrounded by 6 drawn pistols. Today, no one carried a weapon. Adrian stood at the front of the hall. His voice echoed calmly across the silent room. Most of you remember what happened here. No one moved. He continued. When Simone Brooks warned me, I believed procedure before courage. I investigated her. I questioned her. I doubted her. His eyes found Simone standing quietly in the back, still wearing the same simple black uniform she had worn on her first day. She looked uncomfortable being the center of attention. Adrian walked toward her. Every employee instinctively stepped aside. He stopped only inches away. Without saying a word, he reached toward the name badge clipped to her uniform. It read simply, Maid. He carefully removed it. The room remained absolutely silent. From the inside pocket of his jacket, Adrian took out another badge. Simple, elegant, silver. He fastened it onto her uniform himself. The new title caught the light beneath the chandelier. Special advisor to the Kang family. A quiet gasp spread through the room. Simone stared at the badge in disbelief. I don't deserve this. Adrian smiled faintly. You earned it the moment you chose my life over your own. He turned toward every employee gathered in the hall. His next words were spoken without anger, without pride, only truth. From today forward, no one in this house will ever call Simone Brooks just a maid again. The room fell into complete silence. One by one, the servants straightened their posture. The chefs lowered their heads. The security officers placed a hand over their hearts. Even Victor Hale, the man who had once pointed a gun at her, stepped forward first. He bowed, deeply. Others followed. Not because Adrian ordered them. Because respect cannot be commanded. It can only be earned. Tears gathered in Simone's eyes as she looked. Around the hall, she hadn't become powerful. She hadn't become wealthy. She hadn't become someone different. She was still the same young black woman who had walked into the mansion believing invisible people survived. Only now, everyone saw her. And on that quiet morning, beneath the same chandelier where fear had once ruled the room, the Kang estate remembered something far more powerful than authority. It remembered what dignity looks like.